So when we get into chapter 10, we are talking about the United States Congress. I hope that as you read through the chapter that there were a number of things you found as review. Yes, ma'am. Okay. And there were things that you recognized, I've already heard this before, or I kind of knew how this worked, or maybe you knew a little bit about how it worked, but it helped you to understand it even better. So if I do tend to breeze over something, making the assumption that you already know it, but yet you don't, please don't let me just keep going. Please stop me, raise your hand and say, can you explain that one more time? Or I don't really know what you're talking about. Help me understand that better. So I don't want to belabor any point that we don't need to, but at the same time, I don't want to make assumptions that you already know things about our Congress that you may not know. So this should be review. When we look at our three branches of government, what is the job of the legislative branch? Their job is to make laws, okay? So that is the number one priority of our Congress. Our Congress is divided up into two sections. What are the two sections of our Congress? There's the House and the Senate. And where do we get that idea from? Okay, the British had a similar system as what we have today. Theirs, of course, is parliamentary. Ours is presidential. But they had two houses that they had in their government as well. And so when we look at the national legislature, we do need to make sure that we are drawing a distinct difference between the national level and the state level. A lot of things that we see on the national level trickle down into the states, and many states have a similar setup, but not all of them do. And so just because we see it here in Washington does not necessarily mean that's the same way that it works in our state capital. So it is important that we take states on an individual case-by-case basis as well. So we get into Congress. We know that Congress has two houses. As you mentioned here, there's the House of Representatives and there's the Senate. All right? Updates. Okay, congratulations. Your computer's getting better. Timing is bad. But I guess you just get to sit back and listen. There's this stuff called paper and pencil. I don't use it anymore, but I've heard it's still around. So when we look at our Senate, we could go back to England. We could compare this to the old House of Lords. Now, when you look at British history, House of Lords, is that the upper or lower house? Compared to the House of Commons. House of Lords was upper or lower? It was upper, okay? The people who represented the lords there, they were the wealthy upper class. So in our system, although we are hesitant to say that the Senate is the upper house, it really is. It's not by class like it is in Great Britain, but because of the status and because of the responsibilities in the Senate, we still somewhat think of the Senate as the upper house. Now, because we divide up into two houses, we call it bicameral. Most states will follow that bicameral model. Well, they will have a House and they will have a Senate. Some people don't call it a Senate. Some states call it an assembly. That's more when we get into the state level government. But most will follow that, except for Nebraska. They're the one outsider in all of that. They have a one House system of government in their state, and so other than that, the other 49 they follow a similar model. Yeah.
Why?
Other than the fact that Nebraska is just different, I don't know why they chose that. I think the strongest argument is that it tends to be more efficient. You don't have to go through two separate houses to pass laws. You just go through one and then go to the governor. That's my educated guess. Now, maybe you'll find somebody from Nebraska. Is Mr. Hoisinger from Nebraska? I know he's a Nebraska fan. And only people from Nebraska should ever be Nebraska fans. So I'm drawing a conclusion there. Don't tell him I said that. Although some of you are going to mark that in the video and you're going to make him go back and you're going to use it against me someday. Anyway, so Nebraska is unicameral. That would be my best guess as to why is efficiency there. So the House of Commons would be similar to our House of Representatives or vice versa there when we look at the British government. The bicameral system here also helped us to be able to come up with the Connecticut Compromise. Without the compromise that we learned about way back in the first chapter, without us coming to a bicameral system like we have here, the Constitution would have never been passed. It would have fallen apart because we had, if you think back, we had two different states arguing. We had Virginia and we had New Jersey that were arguing over different plans for the new government. And if it had not been for Roger Sherman and Connecticut coming in with a bicameral system here, chances are we would be the un-United States of America today. Disunited States. Sad about the soccer team, though, by the way, too. Yeah. That was, sorry to bring that up. I know. I was really sad about that. Yeah, like the late 80s or 90s, something like that. Yeah. Ever since I've been watching soccer, they've been in the World Cup. So that tells you something because I'm old. All right, so when we look at congressional sessions, the session officially starts on January 4th, where the new Congress will take over. That's going to happen every 2 years, so every even-numbered year. Well, I guess I should say it actually takes place on the beginning of the new odd-numbered year. But every 2 years, you're going to have a new Congress because of the elections that happen. So this coming year, January of 2018, you will not have a new Congress. They will be the same ones we had in the past. But according to Constitutional Amendment number 20, that has now changed the beginning of Congress to January 4th and has set that date there. They do that so that way Congress is set in place before the president gets inaugurated to help the government begin working in motion. It also helps for presidential appointments. When the new president takes over on, review here, what day? January 20th, yeah. When he takes over on the 20th, Congress has had already 16 days where they could start reviewing some of his appointments and people that he wants to put in his cabinet. So that way, as soon as the president takes the oath of office, he can begin governing, well, after the parties are all over and stuff. But that's another topic for another time. So that way they can start going through that process there. So each year starts that new session, but we don't always have a new group of congressmen coming in, depending upon if it's an election year or not. So Congress has the ability to adjourn, but there are rules for that. They cannot adjourn for more than 3 days without the consent of the other house. Why do you think that is? Why could the Senate not dismiss for more than 3 days without the consent of the House of Representatives? Everybody's busy writing and typing. I get that. I'll give you a moment here to let it sink in. Why are these rules for adjourning? Do we understand what adjourn means? Take a break. Okay. Take a break. Go home. We're no longer working on business in our formal meetings. So some guys may fly home to Washington State. They may fly home to Arizona, and that's a long way to go. Why would we not want them to take a break for more than 3 days without the consent of the other? Charlie, what do you think? Okay.
So that if the other house wants to get something done, that requires the other house there to do.
Absolutely. This also prevents somebody from storming off because discussions have broken down. And so let's say that the House is trying to get a bill passed to the Senate, and the Senate just says, no, no, we're not going to do anything. And the House says, well, we'll revise it, we'll work on it, we'll make it work for you guys. And the Senate, just to avoid having to vote on it, they just decide to dismiss and leave. Well, that's not fair to the House, so they have to come to that agreement where, okay, we both agree that this is our break time, we're going to let everybody go home for a period of time, and then we'll come back. You also cannot have any separate session locations. So if Congress is going to meet officially, they all need to meet in a similar location. The Senate cannot have a meeting in Chicago while the House is meeting in Washington for the very same reason that Charlie just mentioned for us, that they need to be able to have close communication and work together on all those things. So that is important when we are thinking about those sessions. Now, there are special sessions that can be called into place. So the president has in his powers and his abilities to call Congress into session for a special meeting. And he can call each house by themselves. So he could bring in just the Senate. He could bring in just the House if he wanted to. And this is intended for emergency situations only. It's not for personal issues. It is if there's a national emergency. And there have been 26 of these the president has used, but none since 1948, where we have called Congress together. The House of Representatives has never been called in separately. So typically they get left out of this. But the House has been called in 46. I'm sorry, I'm thinking of special meetings here. So the House has met in a special session 0 times by themselves. The Senate has met a number of times by themselves. But it was not necessarily a normal session. It was one of these special sessions. So there are exceptions here to the adjourning point of that. But president typically has to call a special session, and the House of Representatives has never convened separately without the House there. So let's talk about the House of Representatives now. We're going to begin with what you want to think of as a lower house, if you want to think of it that way, and then we'll move into the upper house. This is the Speaker of the House, coming from my home state of Wisconsin. Yay, Paul Ryan. Go Wisconsin. What'd you say? He's probably a bad guy? Is that what you said?
He's probably bad at his job.
Bad at his job. Well, that depends on who you ask. Some will agree with you on that. I will reserve my opinion to myself because I don't want to sway you on that. So, House of Representatives, Speaker of the House is Paul Ryan. You need to know who the Speaker of the House is. You need to recognize Paul Ryan. He is, for right now, Speaker of the House. We'll see how long he stays there. Of course, he also ran as a vice presidential candidate back in 2012, unsuccessfully, but he has gained a whole lot of popularity. One of the things that he is promoting and really trying to work on is a balanced budget. It is not passed yet. So he did it in the state, or he helped do that in the state of Wisconsin, helped Governor Walker do that. That's one of his big things. So anyway, let's move on from him. Let's talk about some of the members here. There are 435 total members in the House of Representatives. So the exact number of representatives, that 435, is nowhere to be found in the Constitution. That is instituted by congressional law, not by the Constitution itself. The Constitution only requires apportionment. You might want to venture a guess as to what does apportionment mean?
Are appointed?
Not necessarily appointed. Apportionment was also mentioned in your districting game that you guys did.
Like the distribution of the seats.
Yes, so it's the distribution of how many seats go to each state. That is apportionment. So Congress talks about apportionment, but it does not talk about the specific number. It does require that the total number of representatives be distributed among the states based on their population. So at the minimum, everybody has to have at least one per state. And there are some states that only have one. What states are they? Without Googling, without looking them up. Give me one state you think might have only one. Tasha? Delaware is one of them. Let's see, there's a total of 7. Delaware is one of them. Charlie? Alaska's another one. You got it.
Isn't it
Wyoming? Wyoming is on that list. Montana is also on that list. We've got 3 to go.
Idaho.
I got a question. Is one of the Dakotas on there? I can't remember.
Yes. Which one do you want to guess?
Both. South.
So,
South Dakota's on there, yes. North Dakota's also on there, yes. You want to throw more Dakotas out there? No. We got one left. One left. There are a total of 7. We've hit 6 of them.
Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico.
It's an eastern New England state. It's not Rhode Island.
Oh,
It's population, not land mass. Think about a
Vermont.
no. New England, low population. Vermont, there it is. Yeah, Vermont was the 7th one. Okay, now I'm not going to quiz you. I'm not going to test you over those. That was just for fun, so that way we know there are a total of 7 of those that only have 1. What's the highest?
California.
California, yeah, by far, California. So I think they have 53, because they have a total of 55 electoral votes, I think. So they'd have 2 senators and 53, if I am not mistaken on that. Now, there are some non-voting members in Congress. You can see up here on the screen, I've listed the non-voting members, and why would we put these people in there? Why would we allow this group to essentially sit and observe, but they don't get a vote in Congress? Tasha? Okay, they are American territories. They're not states, so therefore they don't get a vote in there. But why would we want them even a part of this? Why would we allow them in there, Charlie? Okay, we want them to feel like they are a part of the United States, but they're not full members because they have not gone through the statehood process. So we want them to hear what we are doing because a lot of our laws do apply to them, not all of them. And we also want them to, we have military bases there. We also offer protection for many of these locations, and so we want them to be involved and offer their input. Remember the big disagreement? What caused the Revolutionary War? No taxation without representation. Now, a lot of taxation doesn't apply here to these guys, but we don't want to make them feel like they are not heard. We want to give them a voice in our government as well. So, congressional term. When we're talking about the House of Representatives, you get a 2-year term. That will be different from the Senate, which we'll talk about later. But you only get 2 years. So this is why members in the House are very cautious of their voters. They're very careful about what they say and what they do because they know that they've only got a 2-year job guarantee. And then after 2 years, they've got to be reelected regardless of their popularity. They might be doing really well. They've still got to go through the election process. So they don't want to do anything that's going to harm them getting elected. How long can you serve in the Senate? How many consecutive terms are you allowed? For life? Well, it's not 4. Well, explain, what do you guys mean by for life?
Until you get appointed.
Okay, okay. Yeah. I want to be careful that we don't confuse that there. So there's no term limit. So you can continue getting elected as many times as you want, as long as the voters will continue to put you in that seat. I want to hesitate saying for life just because that's what we deal with in the Supreme Court. You do have to go through the election process every 2 years when you are serving in the House of Representatives. We have had some attempts to put term limits on these guys here. Would that be a good idea? Should we limit them to only serving for, let's say, 4 terms? So that'd be 8 years. What are the positives of term limits? Let's think of some positives. Why would that be a good thing? Give me some arguments for good term limits. Tell you what, let's do this. Instead of because I'm hearing from like the same 2 or 3 people. I want you to